So each sound that we have talked about so far is what we call a phoneme, right? So what is a phoneme? A phoneme is a distinct sound. It's a distinctive sound, a sound that makes a difference in word meaning. So whatever contributes to a difference in word meaning, we call it a phoneme, right? So how do we test whether a sound is a phoneme or not? How do we test whether a sound makes a difference in word meaning or not? By comparing two words, right? And you want to keep most of the elements in the word the same, or else you wouldn't be testing the same thing, right? So what we do is we test a pair of words that consists of two similar looking words, like more and nor. There's only one difference, right? And we call this a minimal pair, right? You remember? A minimal pair is a pair of words that has only one difference. And that's where you want to test whether a sound is a phoneme or not, whether a sound is a significant sound, whether a sound is a distinctive sound or not. So here you are testing what? M and N, right? So, and there is a difference in meaning, which is more, high up, and then nor, no, right? So it means that both M and N contribute to meaning difference. So we call M and N two different phonemes, right? And this is the same as in the second case where you have N with a tail, and then N, right? So sing is different from sin in terms of meaning. So we know that N is a phoneme and N with a tail is also a phoneme, like that. So you can do that with vowels also. E and E are different phonemes because they contribute to meaning difference in beat and bit. Beat here is to hit, right? And then bit is a piece of something, a small piece of something. So you know what a phoneme is. But a phoneme is significant, it's important in determining the meaning of a word, but it's an abstract representation of allophones, right? So in reality, number 3, I should hit this one. Now, where were we? It's an abstract representation of allophones, right? In reality, when we pronounce a sound, we never pronounce, can you add CE here? We never pronounce them alike. We never pronounce them alike. So for example, T as in top, T here, the first T, and T as in stop. When we pronounce them, yes, they are the same T, but we do it a little bit different each time, right? Top and stop, like that. So these are what we call variants, different variations, different forms of the same T, right? Different forms, just minor differences between them. So the variants are called allophones of the phoneme T, right? So a phoneme here is just like a family of real sounds that we pronounce in actual conversation. So the concept is like this. If I were to use an analogy for phoneme and allophone, so if you see this symbol, you know what it stands for, right? This symbol is the symbol for supermanhood, right? Supermanhood. But in reality, in actuality, you don't see this, right? You only see Clark Kent and then Superman, right? And they never appear in the same environment. They never appear in the same position because they are one and the same, right? So phoneme is here, and then we have, in reality, different variants of the same phoneme, like that. So, for example, in English, we have stop allophones, right? You know stops. So stops include things like P, T, K, right? And B, D, and G, like that. Important stop allophones include, you see H above this, the superscripted H. H represents aspiration, right? Aspiration is what we call the puff of air that comes out, that accompanies our pronunciation of a sound. So when you say P, aspirated P, P with an H, aspirated T, aspirated K, you have puff of air, right? Like that, right? So in initial position and in stress syllable. So where do you find aspirated voiceless stops? Only in this position, initial position, and also in stress syllables, right? And elsewhere elsewhere. In other cases, you will find unaspirated voice stop elsewhere, right? So after S especially, right? And you might have what we call unreleased, another allophone, unreleased voiceless stop, meaning you don't release anything out at all and don't release any air out at all at the end of the word. So you see this, what we call mnemonic for practicing. So Peter, for example, the word Peter, you have two stops here, right? Two voiceless stops, P and then ter, right? So based on these rules, P, the initial P should be aspirated, right? So you say Peter like that, right? So T is unaspirated because it's not in the initial position and it's not in a stressed syllable. So Peter like that. Piper. So the first P is aspirated, second P unaspirated. Picked. The first P is aspirated like that. And so on. In terms of real representation on what we call, this is a sound spectrogram, right? This is a sound spectrogram. When we speak, speech sounds actually consist of different sound waves like this, right? So this is the word tie with T as an aspirated version of it, and this is sty, right? Tie and sty. So here you see the aspiration, which means that you have a puff of air here, right? And the vowel begins here. You see the blacker or the darker bunch of sound waves here represent vowel sounds. Vowel sounds have higher energy, so that's why you see the blackened area here. And then consonant sounds do not have such high energy, right? And here, the version that has no aspiration, there is no delay in the start of the energy like this, right? So there's no delay, just a little bit before it starts, right? Unlike this one, where you have a long delay before the start of the vowel here. The vowel onset is the beginning, right? The vowel onset here is delayed because of that aspiration or puff of air. But here, the T, this is the T, there's no aspiration, so the vowel can begin right away. Okay? The last thing that we'll talk about before we move on to new stuff is stress and intonation. So we have talked about vowels and consonants, right? Vowels and consonants are what we call segmental features. They are things that we have that constitute a syllable, right? But stress and intonation are different because they are superimposed. We call them super-segmental, right? Super-segmental features because they are superimposed on a syllable. So stress, or you can call it accent, and intonation, or you can call it pitch, are supra-segmental features extending over segments, right? You superimpose on a particular syllable. And every word spoken in isolation in English contains at least one syllable bearing primary stress, right? So in every syllable, or every word, you must have at least one primary stressed syllable. In multi-syllable words, a secondary stress is possible, right? So, but at least you must have one primary stress, right? If there's only one syllable, it's that syllable, right? If uttered in isolation, right? And as to the stress patterns of English, we have just only one pattern, which is easy to predict. In real English words, which we call Germanic words. English is a Germanic language, right? So in real English words, we have just one primary stress, which is fixed and predictable because it's initial stress. So I put the stress before that stress syllable. So apple, father, happy, gold mine, blackbird, right? So in real English words, in native English words, words that we don't borrow from other languages, in other words. So in real English words, the stress is fixed on the initial syllable, okay? With this exception only. Only prefix verbs, verbs that have prefix, the stress will be on the root. That's common sense, right? Because the root is the most important word. So in things like forget, the stress is on the root, which is get, because for is a prefix, right? Understand, the root is stand, so you put the stress there, and believe, the stress is here, live, right? And then be is a prefix. So all of these are native English words, right? But as you know, we borrow a lot of words from Romance languages, from Latin, from French, from Italian, and so on. So stress patterns in those languages are harder to predict, and rules are often complicated. For example, here, disdain, delight. So you have the stress on the last syllable, right? The last syllable, because it ends with an N, and also it ends with a T, for example. But here you have cancel, which is the same thing, last syllable, but elicit, we call penultimate syllable, right? The syllable before the last, like that. So rules in these languages are often complicated and hard to predict. So normally when people study English and study English phonology, what they do is they have to memorize a set of complicated rules that involve putting stress on the right syllables for words that we borrow from other languages. And this is very important. Unstressed vowels tend to be reduced to the schwa or the high front lax vowel, right? And this has caused a lot of changes, or also an important change in English, which we'll study later. So, for example, explain, the stress is here, right? Explain, you see the vowel A, right? Explain, the stress is on the second syllable because this is not a native English word, right? We borrow it from Latin. So, but when we add a prefix, a suffix, ation, it becomes explanation. You see, A becomes schwa, right? And then ne, this is where it's stressed, has the full vowel. So in this syllable, which used to be stressed, right, we have a schwa instead. Emphatic, the stress is here, so we have a full vowel value, emphatic. But in this case, when you switch it to a nominal version, a noun version of it, we have emphasis, right, instead of emphasis. So we have emphasis because the stress is on the front instead, this one. Invoke, invocation, the stress, when you change it to a noun, the stress pattern changes so that voke becomes v, and so on. So this shows how various vowels could be reduced to this central vowel. The reason is the central vowel is a mid, which is in a relaxed position, right? This is the normal position of the tongue. You don't have to raise it, you don't have to lower it. So it's in the mid position, and also this is the mid region, right? Central region. So it's easier to pronounce. So that's why when you don't need to stress, everything becomes a schwa, like that, okay? So we finish perhaps 70% of that chapter. What we'll do is we will go over, this should be new stuff to many of you or most of you. We'll look at writing, English writing system. So this is the second PowerPoint slide set. So who may need a printout of this? So today we'll talk about writing systems, right? Especially with an emphasis on the origin of English writing and also the development of English alphabet. We study sounds, now we come to writing, right? So what is writing? So to define writing, right? If we were able to define writing like this, writing is a system of more or less permanent marks, right? So you mark it so that it lasts a long time, right? So that people can come back and read it, can get information, can retrieve information, right? So it's a system of more or less permanent marks used to record language to graphic means, so things that you can see, so that others can retrieve the information, right? And you might ask, when was the first writing invented, right? We don't know exactly when, right? Because we don't have surviving records until now, right? But what we know is that literature is not, what we know is not for literature, right? Even though when you use writing, you can record literature, that's not the primary purpose of writing. Because when the first writing was invented, we already had what we call oral literature, right? Oral literature is when you transmit literature, poems, or stories or legends by word of mouth, right? And perhaps some poems are longer than others, but people have memory aid such as alliteration. You guys know alliteration, right? The use of the same first sound for every word to help memorize the verse. And you have things like, what else? Regular meter to help you, and also repetition and so on. But the first writing was for the purpose of trade, So you record, so you keep a record of how many lambs you sent to a customer, how many barrels of oil you sent to customer, like that. So it was for more mundane, more basic purposes rather than for literature, for preserving literature like that. However, in linguistic terms, we know that writing is secondary to spoken language because writing is supposed to keep a record, right? For keeping record of what is supposed to be in conversation, right? So it's secondary, right? And can you take out one P here? For writing system, we have what we call pre-writing and true writing, right? Pre-writing and true writing. So pre-writing here, we call it pre-writing. It's not writing per se because it's devoid. It has no direct linguistic content. For example, grammatical words and affixes. These are important, right? Because you need grammatical words like conjunctions such as and, but, however, like that, and affixes in order to help build complex sentences, right? In order to convey contrast ideas, in order to compare and contrast things like that, you need these grammatical words. But pre-writing in all the forms, they are empty of the direct linguistic content, and we don't know what they are for. We don't know whether they are just for ritual purposes or not. So pre-writing includes petroglyph. Petroglyphs in, petro is just like gasoline, right? It means from stone, from rock. Petro is rock or stone. So it's cave drawings, right? So you see drawings, you see pictures that people drew on the walls of the cave like that, and then pictograms and ideograms. These are what we call pre-writing, in the pre-writing stages, right? I will show you a picture in a minute here. And then we have true writing, what we regard as real writing, right? Systematic system of writing. So we have logographic system, you can call them logogram, like logogram. So logogram like this. Oh. GRAM, gram. It doesn't allow me to add or delete. And syllabic system and alphabetic system, right? So you have 3. So let's go through these different forms. Now here what you see is from perhaps American Indian. From an American Indian tribe, you see a lot of petroglyphs here, right? So one glyph is one picture, right? And we don't think of this as true writing because we don't know what this is for, right? We don't know whether it's to keep a record or whether it's for religious purposes or for what purpose. We don't know, right? So we don't regard it as writing. And we cannot be exactly sure of the meaning of this, right? And we don't have a lot of evidence to decode, to decipher the meaning. So this kind of thing hasn't survived in a large amount, so we don't know whether it's systematic or not. So we call it pre-writing instead of writing, right? So maybe this picture represents the idea of climbing, a person climbing, and this presumably is a ladder, and this like bunch of circles or spiral shapes might represent something which we don't know what it's for, right? And then perhaps the wavy lines here, maybe they are waves, or these things are trees. We don't know whether they are really trees or not, and we don't know the purposes, right? So we don't call this writing like that. So this is cave drawing, petroglyphs, right? And then the second one, out of petroglyph, you have what we call pictograms, right? So pictograms are different. Pictograms, you can call them pictograms or pictographs. Pictogram or pictographs, you have a picture that resembles an object. A picture that resembles is like, right? A picture that is like, that takes the form of that object that it is meant to represent. So this one is represent a person on a wheelchair, like that. So the picture should match the reality, the real object, right? So here, the picture of a sun, and then you see the rays here, so it means sunny, like that. And then when you see clouds, it means it's cloudy, like that. So the picture resembles the object that it is meant to represent. So it's not arbitrary, meaning that there is a correlation, there is a correspondence between the picture and what it tries to represent, right? And it doesn't represent any sounds or any words in the language, right? And usually this is for non-literate cultures, right? Meaning for groups that have no real language, that cannot write or read, okay? Because when you see this, you know what it stands for exactly, because it's meant to kind of take an image of the real thing, the real object, right? So this is an example. This is supposed to be a hunter, and this is supposed to be an action of living, and then this is perhaps sleep one night on an island. So this is an island like that, right? So whether or not it truly represents or accurately represents the object in reality, that's a different issue, because it depends on your artistic skills also, right? But presumably people who are familiar with the conventions can guess the meaning, right? But again, just like the petroglyphs, right, is devoid of real linguistic relationships between things. How do you represent the word on, for example? How do you represent the word to? How do you represent the word and, right? And is addition, for example. To shows the destination, like that. How do you represent that kind of relationship, right? So out of the pictograms, we have what we call ideogram or ideogram. You can pronounce it both ways, ideograms or ideograms. So this has more abstract relationship. One picture, one symbol is one idea or one concept, not an object itself, right? So it's more abstract, right? And one picture, one grapheme, one picture is one concept or idea and it's more arbitrary. But again, it doesn't represent any words or sounds in a language. So let's see the development, right? So you have a pictograph here, a man with a spear, right? It's meant to resemble that object or that person. So here, and then this is supposed to be a buffalo, so that person's artistic skills allow him to go that far, right? So, which we might look at it differently. We don't think of it as a buffalo, right? So in a pictographic system, you have man with a spear and a buffalo like this, right? But when it becomes an ideogram, it means hunting, right? So because you can associate the spear as the weapon that is used for hunting, like that. So it's more abstract ideogram. So you can perhaps guess the meaning from the word ideal here, right? Ideal to represent an idea, right? Just like this. Pictogram, a cow represents a cow, right? But for ideogram, this is a leaf, yes. But because of the color, right, and because of this kind of leaf, you want it to represent a more kind of abstract concept of season, which is autumn or fall. A red diagonal here represents no, like that, right? Another symbol, another ideogram that we use is minus or plus sign, right, across languages. What does plus represent? Plus. This is an ideogram, right? Ideogram. It could represent the concept of being positive, right? As opposed to negative, like -2 plus 4 in terms of degree, right? In terms of degree. Plus 4 Celsius, right? Plus 4 degrees, like that, as opposed to -2, like that. Or it could represent the idea of addition, right? For example, 2 plus 2 is 4, like that. So you can see that at least there are two concepts that are associated with that symbol. So it's an ideogram, right? Or it could also represent the concept of over. Like in this class, we have 40 plus people, which means what? We have over, right? Over 40 people, like that. So at least how many ideas do we have that are associated with that ideogram? We have 3, right? And maybe more even, right? So this is not a pictograph, right? Because a pictograph is supposed to represent an object, right? There's no object that is like that, but maybe there is like a hospital. Hospital is still, if we want to have this kind of thing represent a hospital or a clinic, this kind of thing, right? Still an ideogram, right? Because that's not what a hospital looks like. Another example is this one. Do you use this in Korean? This sign? What is it? Ants, right? Ant. In English, it's and, right? For example, you, when we read it, it's you and I, right? So it's a symbol of addition, right? It's an ideogram, like that. But you don't say and when you see this symbol in Korean, right? Maybe you say 하고, 이랑, 그리고, like that. But whenever we see it, English-speaking people, when we see this, we just say it like you and I, and so on. Because and is an English word, right? The same symbol will be pronounced it in other Romance languages like Spanish or Italian or Latin. That's how it originated. So you might see the same thing written like this, same thing, right? So this is supposed to be like T and then there's an E here. There's a kind of a development, a line of development as to how the word 8 has come to be written as like that. So this is kind of the pre-S-like shape. So this is more E and then T, like that, right? So this is like E and then T. It used to be the last, what we call the last letter of the English alphabet, X, Y, Z, and then the word end. But we don't have that anymore. Only just use it as a kind of shorthand for the word end. So we have pictographs and then ideographs, right? So that's pre-writing. Now, out of the ideographic system, we have logographic system, right? That developed out of the ideographic system. So if a particular ideogram is translated, always translated by the same word, it comes to stand for, then we have a logogram or logograph. Just like this one. In English, it represents the word and only one, right? So in this case, it's true writing because you use one symbol to represent one word rather than a concept. So supposedly, in this type of language that is based on the logographic writing system, in this type of language, you have so many symbols, right? Because one symbol is one word. So you have one symbol for camel, one symbol for meal. Doesn't matter whether two words sound alike or not. Because they are different words, they mean different things, you need two different symbols, like that. So in this kind of system, you have to learn or you have to memorize a lot of symbols, right? And each symbol is separate because it's a different word. You might find this in ancient languages like Egyptian or Hittite, but you also have contemporary examples like Chinese and Japanese kanji, which developed from Chinese also, right? For example, here, for each word, buy, open, east, read, nothing, bird, language, Buddha, you have to learn a specific character for each word, right? So for this type of language, grammar might not be that complicated, but what is complicated is all the different strokes that you have to memorize, and presumably there must be a kind of order, right? That you have to start from here and then here. It's not like you can start from this and in any direction that you want, right? So you have to learn, you have to master the stroke also. So that's one system, right? So this might not be efficient for all languages because you need each character for each word, right? Now, let's see. For the next one, here we have what we call the syllabic writing system or syllabary. In this case, it's based on sound rather than word, right? The logographic system is based on word, but the syllabic writing syllabary is based on sound rather than word. So here, every symbol represents one syllable, right? A syllable consists of a very simple structure, consonant and vowel, like la or ma. And a word can be created by arranging syllables together. So you have one symbol for la, one symbol for ma, and then you can put them together, la, ma, and then you switch the order, ma, la, and then you rearrange, and then you duplicate them like that. So this would be efficient for languages that have simple structures, right? And we have examples of Japanese hiragana and katakana, but kanji is not, right? So like this. So you see that this is supposed to be the consonant, right? And then it's supposed to be combined with a, I, U, A, O, like that, vowels here. So if you combine 0, there's no consonant, with a, you have one. You have one symbol. And then if you combine with k, so you make ka, right? You have this symbol. You see that there is no resemblance between ka and a, right? There's no resemblance, right? Because it's not a mixing. It's not a mixing of k and a. It's one symbol for one syllable. It's not a mixing of this and this. So you don't have two things, right? Unlike in Korean where you have hiyok and a, like that, right? So here is a different symbol altogether to represent the sound or to represent the syllable ka. And if you have sa, it doesn't look like ka, even though they share the vowel a, right? There's no resemblance between the two. It's just sa, it's like that. So you have to memorize, as a learner of Japanese, you have to memorize ka, how to spell that, how to spell sa, how to spell ta. But how many do you have? It's not many, right? So that's a different system, right? And it's efficient for, as I said, languages that have a simple syllable structure, but English is not one of that. English has a very complicated structure, syllable structure. We have many sounds like strength, the word strength, S-T-R, right? S-T-R. That's like 3 sounds altogether, and so on. So you need even more symbols, right, for English. The last one here is what we call, this is the final step in writing that is based on sound. Syllabaric system is also based on sound, but that's on each syllable, right? But here the alphabetic writing is the kind of the last step in the phonemization of writing, and we call it the alphabet system. So each symbol here stands for a single phoneme, right? We study phoneme. So it's a single phoneme, not a syllable. So C stands for K, the K sound, like that. The letter A stands for the vowel A, for example. The letter M, the symbol M, stands for the sound M. So we can mix and match, right? All the different letters and all the different phonemes here, and you have words. So examples include Korean, Greek, English, and Hebrew. When we think about Chinese and when we think about other languages, there is no writing system that is based on one particular type, because within a particular language you might see 2 systems coexisting. Like Chinese, mainly based on logographic system, right? But with some characters, you have the syllabic system in the Chinese language also, right? And in English, you have things like, and also you use this smiley face when you do texting, right? So these are all ideograms, right? And logograms, and so on. Okay? Now, the last thing that we'll talk about today is the history of the English alphabet. The word alphabet. Alphabet includes a set of letters that we use, right? A set of symbols that we use to represent consonants and vowels, but it is a Greek word. Alphabet is a Greek word. So alpha is the first letter of Greek, right? And alphabet, is beta or beta, right? So it comes from alpha and beta. We call the first 2 letters of Greek that we inherited from, we call them alphabet, like alpha, beta, like that. So let's see. It's believed that all the alphabets in the world's languages, doesn't matter what language, descend in the alphabetic system, right? We're not talking about the logographic system like Chinese. But for the languages that use the alphabetic system, like English, Hebrew, and so on, we believe that they descend from a single common ancestral alphabet, a common ancestor language. And we believe that this is what we call the Phoenician culture, right? It descended from the Phoenician culture. The Phoenicians are a culture that lived around the Mediterranean Sea, right? Around the Palestinian area, for example, like Lebanon, Syria, that area. And they are a trading and seafaring culture. So when they created the first known alphabet, they spread it off to other cultures, including the Greeks, the Romans, and also the Germanic people or the English-speaking people. So each letter was given a name, right? Each letter was given a name, and Aleph and Bet for the first two letters. And you can guess that Aleph becomes alpha, Bet becomes beta. So we have the word alphabet like that. So let's see. So the Greeks then, so you have the Phoenicians, right? Who lived around the Mediterranean coast, around Lebanon, Syria, and around the Middle East area. They spread it off, even as far back as India, or as far as or as north as Germany, or even Sweden, and so on. So the Greeks then, around 800 BC, before Christian era, borrowed it and added new signs to represent vowel sounds. There were no vowels to start with. So Aleph, they pronounce it as alpha, Bet becomes beta in the Greek system. So the Greeks borrowed the set of alphabet from the Phoenicians, right? And then we have the Etruscans. So the Etruscans people lived in the Italian peninsula, Italy in modern world, and they predated the Italian people, right? So the Etruscans, again, borrowed from Greeks or adopted from the Greeks, right? So the predecessors of the Romans in Italy borrowed the Greek alphabet and developed two versions. We have two versions out of the Greek alphabet. We have the runic alphabet and the Latin alphabet, right? The runic, I will talk about the runic in a minute, and then the Latin alphabet. So the Germanic peoples, there are many tribes of the Germanic peoples, and the Germanic peoples adopted the runic alphabet here, right? And brought it to England. So we have the start of what we call the English writing system then, using the runic alphabet. And then when we, I don't know if it's on the next slide or not. Yes, so the runic alphabet was in use until Roman soldiers and priests arrived in England around the 5th century, and runes slowly faded off. So meaning that when the Roman soldiers came and occupied England, it's a British art, right? So when they came to England, they brought with them the Latin alphabet, right? Because Roman people spoke Latin, right? So they brought the second version, which is the Latin alphabet. And then runes slowly faded off, okay? So now we have the Latin alphabet that we use until the present day, right? We have used until the present day. So this is the Greek, not the Greek, the Egyptian hieroglyphic here. So it's ideogram or even pictogram here, right? But then this is the true writing, remember? The Proto-Sinaitic here, or the Phoenician. So the Phoenician in the third column here, you see? Before that, the hieroglyphic and Proto-Sinaitic here, they are pictographs and ideographs, right? But the Phoenician is the true writing, is the true alphabetical system, right? So here, they developed the first set of alphabet, right? Which are supposed to come from the hieroglyphic and the pictographic and also the ideographic system here. So you see the cow, right? It's supposed to be a cow here. Cow and then cow still. But then when the Phoenician developed the alphabetic system, it might resemble the cow here, but you might not be able to guess if you don't know the history line, right? But here is supposed to be a cow. And this is supposed to be a house. The second one is supposed to be a house. So I don't know how it got to that point. But the third one also doesn't look like what it used to be, right? So, but still, this is the but we know we can expect that because the alphabetic system is supposed to represent sound rather than the object or the concept, right? So this is the first two writing, and then the early Greek system adopted that, and then they make some changes, but still you can see a lot of resemblance between the two systems. And then we have later Greek and the Latin developed out of that, and then other systems including Hebrew and others like Russian and so on, right? What I want to show you actually is this one. So we pass this out. So it's the whole set of alphabet here. The development of the English alphabet. You can see it in graphic forms. This one here also. So everyone has got a copy, right? So this is the whole set, you guys. This is the whole set. You have on the handout. This is the whole set from A to C, right? From A to C. You will see that U, X, Y, Z. Thank you. You will see that the last three, X, Y, Z, and also U, they were not existent before in the Greek system. They were not existent, right? But here we have added from perhaps around the Roman time, V, X, Y, and Z, even though they are not frequent. So the true writing started from here, the third column, right? The Phoenician. And then you have the names here, Aleph, which is ox, right? Aleph means ox. That's how they call ox or oxen, Aleph. And then the second one, Beth, that's the name of the consonant, the name. Just like the name in English, right? A, B, C, that's the name. And you have Hiop, Iung, like that, Hiu, and so on, right? That's the name. So Aleph is the name, which means ox. Beth is the name for B, for house. And then Gamma or Gammo for C, like that, and Dag and K and Wa and so on, right? So the second column gives you the name, right? The third column gives you the true alphabetic writing, right? And then you have, in the fourth column, you have the Greek, early Greek, and then later Greek, and then Etruscan, that line of development, Etruscan, predecessors of the Romans, and then you have classical Roman, and then other variations, other developments, right? You see this column here, it says uncial, right? Uncial. You see that they are all capitalized letter. That's a different version, right? So there is the lowercase, non-capitalized, and also capitalized version, but uncial is capitalized version. We call it the majuscule. So when you see this word, it means that it's all capitalized. Majuscule. Major, you know the word major, right? So same thing. Majuscule means it's all capitalized. Capitalized version. And you use the majuscule version, the uncial majuscule, when you want to write something that's formal, like religious writing, for example, or you write a letter to the king. So to be formal, you use capitalized letters, right? In the old days. And the different version of it, just like this, you see here, we call it minuscule or minuscule. Minus or minute, you know the word minute, which means small, right? Minute. The minuscule version is used for informal writing, like between friends or to record how many lamps you send to people, to your customers, and so on. Actually, the difference between the capitalized and non-capitalized is just that they cut it in half. So A, right? So if you cut it in half, so you got, let's see here. So A becomes this A. So if you cut it in half and you just write it here, right? Or B, the same thing. So if you cut it in half, so you have B like that, right? But some are the same, like C. How do you cut it in half? It would be the same, right? If you cut it in half, it's gonna be the same for C. Right? C, you cut it in half, it's still C. Right? So some are inescapably the same, unavoidably the same, right? Similar. Or F would be similar if you cut it in half, right? So actually the minuscule is just cutting the majuscule version into half a piece. And then, you know, it's interesting to study this, and people major in text studies. And you know, there's a version when you write like this, right? Krista is the best professor, like that. So everything is connected, everything is joined, right? There's that version. Did you study this when you were in high school? Because if you don't study this, then it might be difficult to kind of guess what native speakers write, right? So this is called the cursive version. So cursive is when letters are more round and then they are joined together, right? And sometimes with loops, like K, I don't know how they do it. Like K has like loop, like these two loops here, circles, and then Chris loops like this, and everything is connected and everything is joined, and then sometimes you extend over the lines and then down below the line, and so on. So up to this point, what we have studied in this chapter includes the sounds, right, and writing of English, and you see the development of the writing system or the alphabetic system, and how we have the letters that we use, A, B, C, D, E, F, and so on. So actually they are all based on the Greek system, right? Alpha and beta, so we have alphabet, alpha, beta, gamma, and so on, right? Epsilon, iota, and so on. Okay. Now, what about the other system that we had before we got the Latin alphabet? Remember, we call it the runic alphabet, right, or the runes. What do they look like? So here I will show you what they look like. So the runes are used to carve, to do carvings on stones or wood. So here, so there are 2 pages. So I'll keep the first page first. So first, so everyone, take one. And then this is the second. So take one, has 2 at this point. Everyone has 2, right? Everyone has 2. So, you see the runic alphabets on the first page, which looks like this. Again, the runic alphabet represents each sound. Remember, consonant and vowel, right? They might look different from the Latin alphabet, right? Because we have 2 separate systems coming out of the Italian, right? Remember? So the runes are here. You see? So the runes are here. The first one is not aleph or beta, but it's the sound F, right? So there actually, where's the A? A is here. It's not the first letter, right? So the first letter in the runic system, in the runic alphabet system, is F. Is F. So it looks like this, which is an F-like thing that we have. The second one is different. Is U, the U sound, right? The U sound equivalent in modern English is the sound U that we study, right? But it looks like, I don't know, upside U, upside U, upside U. The third one, TH. Remember, we saw this in the first class. It's the P-like thing. It stands for the TH sound, right? It stands for the TH sound. P-like stands for the TH sound, so TH. And then the next one is O, but it looks like an F, right? But it's meant to represent the sound O, like that, and so on. So we have a lot of these. Now we call the runic system the Futork because F-U-T-O-R-K, the Futork, right? The Futork. Just like alphabet, alpha, beta, right? But here, the runic system of the Anglo-Saxon, of the English people, is called Futork, right? Futork, because of the first letters, the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The first 6 letters make up the word Futork, right? Futork. Now, so you are not supposed to memorize this. And they use this for carving on stone or carving on wood, right? And you would see that there is no horizontal stroke. Only vertical stroke and slanted stroke, but no straight horizontal stroke like this. Why? Because if you imagine wood, if you carve onto the wood has grain, right? Like different lines of wood. We call that grain, different grain. If you have a horizontal stroke like this, how could you read? People might think that it's one of the grains of wood, right? So there's no horizontal stroke, right? To avoid confusion with the grain, with the kind of material that you want to engrave on. Now, what you're supposed to do is, you're supposed to, the second one, this is real Old English, guys. Old English, again, before the Roman people came, Old English was written using the runic alphabet, remember? Until we got Roman soldiers, right, in the 5th century. So this is a poem in Old English, a real poem, Old English. So the first one, you see that there are 3 lines, right? The first line is the runic word, right, runic. And the second line is the Old English words, which you haven't studied yet. And the third line, that's the modern English for each verse, right? Now, what you're supposed to do here is to match the symbol, to match the letter, to match the runic letter, the runic symbol, to the sound, and you'll get the word, So you have to look side by side, right? You have to look side by side. So that's why I didn't staple them together, because you have to look side by side. And you have to come up with the let me find my pen here. The words in Old English. So this one looks like what? If you look side by side. The next word. So you have sumon hini, man. The translation is man and him. So the next one is this one. What is that? So it looks like an N, right? It looks like an N with two strokes, kind of coming from up to down. So it's an H, right? It's an H, right? It looks the same, right? Same thing here. Same thing, H. So H, right? Now, second one, what is second one? F-like thing, but you have to be careful. There are two F-like things here. So the second one is yogi, right? A. Oh, you don't have that? F-like thing here. So you put A in there. Okay? The third one. How should I describe that? Arrow-like, but there's only one strike of the arrow. Ayo? This one, right? Can you identify? Arrow-like thing. L. So L. And then next one should be easy to recognize. M-like symbol. Where's M? Yes. Like that. And then two arrows. So you just have to look for that one time. So what is that? Arrow. T, 맞죠? So T, double T, right? And M-like again. So pronounce. Halete, like that. Just phonetically, just like the phonetic symbols that we study. So sumon hine halete. So halete, they give you the translation, salute, right? And so on. So can you do this for homework? Because we are out of time. I thought that we could finish this. So, and try to guess. They didn't give you all, right, the translation, the glosses, because they think that you might be able to see the kind of resemblance between Old English words and also modern English words. So we'll look at this on Monday. So on Monday, we'll go to the third chapter, right, which is more difficult. So this week is basics, right? And then next week will be more difficult. We'll study Indo-European and also all the sound changes. So just think of this week as an introduction week, okay? So see you guys back on Monday.